Okay, in this video, I will be covering the reconciliation program. It'll be more of a walkthrough of the program. I'll be covering some features, but not all features. Where specific features require more detail to be able to understand the functionality, I will be recording separate videos to cover those topics. So without any delay, let's just start the program. So the icon for the reconciliation program is on my screen, so I'm just going to double click it and this should start up the program. You'd be welcomed by the welcome screen once you have licensed it. So I'm just going to go in and log in. So the first thing you're going to need to do is to open your reconciliation data file. So you can go open. I'm going to drag it over to this screen. So as you can see, I have two data files. So how you would start a new reconciliation is, for example, I would copy one of these by Ctrl+C and hitting Ctrl+V, and that'll help you to copy the file here. Now you could rename that file to whatever you like, which represents the reconciliation that you're performing. Now, for example, if it's a bank rec, you might call it bank reconciliation and give it a month and a year, so that you know which month and year it is. If you have many bank recs that you have to do, for example, you might give it a reconciliation. You might actually note the bank number or the GL number on the rec, so that you'll be able to differentiate it. For my purpose, I'm just going to leave this as a training video copy. I'm not going to be naming it, but you can go ahead and name it. So once you've done that, you just need to open it up, and then you get the rest of the functionality of the software being displayed. From there, the next step would normally be for you to go into to import the data and to set up the data. So this is the previous data which was contained in that file that I copied and used. So what you'll need to do is to bring in your new data. Now here is where you would normally import the data, and then you will go ahead and set it up. Once you've set up the data, and what I mean by set up is once you've set up the data, the columns and the fields based on the data that you import, when you do the rec the next month, you will not need to change any of this or do any setup here, because it has already been set up. The fields have been set up, provided the data tables remain the same. Now you would also probably need a company name that you're dealing with, and if this is a bank rec, this data reconciliation program actually can reconcile two sets of data. It doesn't have to be a bank rec. It can be a loan account, for example, or any other two data sets in an inventory system, between one inventory system and the general ledger, for example, provided there is some relationship between the data, which means that they would reconcile, the transactions would reconcile, and you'll be able to identify any items which are in one system that are not in the other system, and be able to investigate those transactions. So you'll start off by providing company name. Now again, this company name, once you set it up on one file and you keep copying that file over for your next months, you don't need to update that. You'll need to give it what is this data reconciliation about. Now in this instance, I'm just doing it on a bank rec. I've just given it an account number so that to differentiate it from other bank recs that I might be doing. And of course, importantly, you need to put in an as-at date, because when you reconcile data, it normally tends to be reconciled as at a point in time. Now the data has been there'll be two sets of data, so the primary data and the secondary data. So what you'll need to do is to then go ahead and import in your data using this functionality, which means you'd export the format. You will which exports it onto Excel, you will copy and paste in the data, which I will demonstrate in other videos. Once you have pasted the data into those files, you can go and import the data into the program. Likewise, you'll do the same steps to import in the secondary data. You would give it a name. Now the source from where the data has been obtained ideally, so here it will be a bank, and a small abbreviation so that it makes it easy to reference it during the program and also when exporting the final reports. Similarly, you'll do that for the secondary data. You'll also need to you may need to actually put in the closing balance of the primary data, and that when you enter the closing balance, it automatically calculates the secondary data's closing balance based on the data sets that have been imported. So you'll need to check that the closing balance reconciles with your closing balance. If it does not reconcile with your generated closing balance, it could mean two things. One is that you either got the opening balance of the primary data wrong, or you have not imported all the data that's needed to perform the reconciliation. Now that could normally be where there was reconciling items in the previous month which need to be included in this data set because they were not reconciled in the previous month. So that's something you need to bear in mind. The next item which you need to set up is whether what constitutes actually an item to reconcile. Now this will depend on how you brought in the data. So if the data in primary set 1, the amount that is a positive, and a positive here in the amount, two positives mean that they reconcile, then you would select positive and positive. If, for example, there is a negative amount here and a positive amount here, and that constitutes a reconciliation or a reconciling item for the data sets you imported, then it'll be positive and a negative. So you can have positive and positive, and negative and negative. They will have the same impact. Or you can, and if you have positive and negative or negative and positive, it'll have the same impact in terms of how it would reconcile, which means it is opposing or being the same. That constitutes a reconciliation. Now, in addition to bringing in the data itself, you have the functionality to bring in the headings of the data. Now, here are the heading columns. So as you can see, it has the date, description and amount, and that is your three primary fields. Starting from data field 1 onwards is actually a copy of the data that you're bringing in. So you would import 3 additional columns based on which the reconciliation primarily works off, and these fields are always active, so you don't need to select it, even though it shows as being blanked out. It means they are active. If you were to select it, it will give you a message saying that it's already selected. Now, with the additional data fields which you brought in, the system allows you to select up to 3 additional columns, which will help you in your reconciliation. So keeping the additional columns to a minimum is always preferred, because the screen gets a little too crowded if you are having more fields. So you select the fields that actually make sense, that enables you to reconcile the two data sets. In this case, I have actually used the batch line, and here also you have the batch number, so I've selected this one. So they have a relationship between each other, and that's why I've selected that. You can also enter in your description, header descriptions here, if you do not wish to import them separately using this functionality over here. You can view the data using these 2 buttons. I shall just review the primary one, and you can see the data here which has been imported for this. You'd notice it's not a very large data set, and that's because it's for demonstration purposes. I didn't want to have too much of data here. You can import up to 40 columns. Now here you can see 20, but you can also see further 20 here if you wish to bring in more. Generally 20 is more than sufficient in terms of columns. So your data would start from here, and these 3 columns are basically columns you create using your data to actually enable the reconciliation process to base the record. The same process applies for the secondary data. So that is about importing the data and setting it up. In addition to this, you can also you need to select the data type. Now the first 3 data types are sort of preset because it's based on that, so they have to be date, a text description, and an amount. But from data item 1 onwards, you can set the data type. Remember, now this is a date. If you were to set an invalid data type and call it maybe something like maybe text or number, you are likely to get something that is other than a date, but most likely to be a number representing the date in the system. So you need to set this up correctly, and if you how you can see whether you set it up correctly is if you were to select something incorrectly, like for example this description. If I were to go and call that a date and you were to view the data, you'd see that that column will most likely be blank because it is not a date column, and then you'll know that you've not set it up correctly. It's ideal if you just import the data columns because that makes it so much more easier. You'll know what it is based on description, and you'll be able to work with it. So that is about importing the data into the system. Once you import the data into the system, you can have a quick summary look at or view of this one by just looking at this one, looking at the view, and it'll show you, okay, so this is the bank statement transaction. They totaled so much. General ledger totaled that much in terms of transactions. As you can see, one is negative, one is positive, and that's why how they reconcile a positive and a negative is a reconciling item. So we'll have reconciling items after we finish off this value, about 1.4 million. The bank statement closing balance was 40,000, leaving the ledger at a balance of 1.4, which is again in line with what is here in terms of the reconciling item, and you can see that it finally reconciles in terms of that. But we have not reconciled any item, they are still unreconciled. We just brought in the transactions. So I'm going to close that down. So that's pretty much the data here. Obviously there's a import folder. You can go and view the import folder and set up your files, I guess. So it's ideal you'd set up your Excel file into the format that needs to be imported, and then you can go and import them in. I will cover that in more detail in subsequent videos when I concentrate on specific aspects of the program. So that's from setting up the data. Now I'm going to go take a step back, and now after the data has been set up, then you go to your reconciliation tools. Now this is your initial reconciliation. As you can see, you have this particular data is reconciled at this point in time. There is a bank error of 1.5, and there is some unpresented checks here, and that's your summary reconciliation. So I'm just going to go and unreconcile these items. So this unreconciles everything, and you start all over again with your reconciliation. So this is if you have made some incorrect matching of data and you want to unreconcile and start all over again. This function is handy, so I'm going to just unreconcile them all. You obviously get a warning because you don't want to lose all your hard work, so say yes in this instance. And as you can see, now these are the unmatched items which are because nothing has been reconciled. Alright, so I shall start with, there is the batch reconciliation where you can reconcile batches, and there is the reconcile and review, which is gives you a host of some automated reconciliation options and some manual reconciliation options, so you can use a combination in whatever is most efficient. So if I go here, as you can see, the two data sets are here. So I have the bank statement, and I have the general ledger, and these are the two. Now this is the additional column which I selected was the batch, and the line description, which is also the batch data, which is here. So Now when you select two items which reconcile and you select it, it will show up here, and you can go and say match it. For example, these two columns which are highlighted in a darker gray indicates that you can double click it to do the same selection on either table. For example, if I were to go and double click this item, it quickly filters it by that amount based on the opposite direction because of how we've selected it there in the setup. And you can see that these two items actually reconcile with each other. So again, I can double click here, this where it is grayed out with a lighter color here. A double click will apply the same select option on both. Alternatively, I can just go select here, and again I can deselect this one and deselect selection there, or I can double click here to select both of the items, which selects this side and this side, and you can see it reconciles. And you can also see what has been selected and see that there's no variance here, so you can actually match that particular transaction. You can now basically when you select here, it will select whatever you have filtered. It'll select the filtered items, which is here is filtered by this amount, so it'll only select the filtered items. Now, and here will show you the total of what has been selected. Now if I were to clear the filters, now double clicking this will again clear the filters on either side, or you can do one at a time. So you can see that item is selected. Now if I were to select, say, this item, as you can see there is a match on that as well, so I can go and select this one and select that item as well. Now as you can see, this is the cumulative amount. If I were to say double click this to deselect it, as you can see it's deselected this item, but there's still a 9,000 that has been selected. That is the previous selection which you made, which is still active. If you want to deactivate all of your selection, you can go and double click this, which would it didn't double click it, double click it deselected it all. Okay, or alternatively you can do a single click here and deselect this side, and a single click here and deselect this side. Now an item has been selected here, so let me just select both of these. So by double clicking that, and I'm saying okay, we can match that. So if I go match, it will match it. Now if I match it like that, you see it's matched it. I can go over here and review my matches. Now you can see that was I matched it manually, so you can see that's the transaction here. Let me go back again. Let's just, now I'd say I want to clear this off. You can highlight it and click delete to clear that off, and then as soon as you leave this box, it will show you the rest of the item. Or alternatively, you can just double click in the box here to clear it. Now if I were to select this one by double clicking this again, I can see that that's a match. I can select this and I can select this one, and they reconcile, so I can match it. So this is a manual, very slow way of doing it, but you can manually reconcile this. So let me go and review it. You can see each of the items here. So as you scroll down, you can see the different matches. I guess I'm going to unreconcile everything again. I guess it clears that off, so I go back. Now there's some automated functionalities for matching. Okay, so let me, now this automated functionality will also only work on what has been filtered. So in this case I don't want to filter it with anything, so I'm going to clear both the filters. You can see all the transactions. Now I am going to see wherever there's an exact match, where the amounts exactly match, I want it to match those items. So I say exact match. So it runs through the process, and it has, as you can see, it's cleared quite a few items. Okay, so which indicates to me that the balance items are likely to be batches, which we need to match using the batches. So that is a reconciliation. Now I can go back and see here, and you can see these are all the exact match, and it'll say exact match, indicating that it wasn't manually done. The system has matched it, and it has found the exact match on the same day. If it is fine, I'm not sure if it has any exact matches on secondary days. on alternative days, but it'll have to tell you within which date range it found the exact match. So if it's on the same day, the chances are that the match is correct, so you wouldn't worry about it. And in most cases, even not on the same day, it tends to be the match is correct. But this is how you would review it. You just scroll down and you'll review it. For instance, say if you don't agree with this match and that's not a correct match based on looking at the descriptions, you think that's not a correct match, so you would go and you say, okay, unmatch that item, which means that item is actually put back here, and the 14 sitting somewhere in the state of or here it is, right? So that's another way. So if I hit exact match again, see, it matched that item again. So that's an exact match function. Now I'm going to go back to the review again, and I'm just going to unmatch everything. Unmatch all of it, so it unmatches it, takes me back to my start point, and I have everything here. Now I'm going to say here is where it'll match if the entire day, if all the transactions in a particular day match in one data set matches all the transactions in that same day on the secondary data, it will treat that as a match, and it'll match the entire day in total. I don't know if any of the days exactly match in full, but let me hit it and see. Oh yeah, all of those transactions did match on the same day. If I were to go to the review, I can see yes, that day all of these transactions are entered here, and we had the same transactions entered here, which gives it a perfect match. See the totals match over here and here, so you know it matched in total. So I'm going to unreconcile it again. All right, go back here. So we've seen the exact match, we've seen the full day match. Now you have the select contra. Select contra actually works data set by data set. So sometimes you might have a transaction and then that transaction was reversed, so that creates a contra entry within one data set. I don't believe I have any contra entries here, but let me just click it to see if it finds any. No, I don't have any contra entries. So if I look at the selected items here, there's nothing. Selected items here, there's nothing. Okay, back to here. Right, so that's another functionality for you, which helps you to clear out any reversal entries or correction entries that have been made when doing the transactions. In addition to that, what we have here is the save filters. Now there might be instances where a particular type of filter enables you to find some transactions. Like for example, if I were to what can I select here to demonstrate that? So for example, if the pay EFT, for example, so I'll copy that and then I'm going to paste it here in the text one for the description. So that gives me all the pay EFT. So that's the figure here. I want to see if it reconciles with the direct credit of company ABC. No, it doesn't. So there is all of this is direct credit. That's why. So it's not. What if I select this ABC company? Let's see. No, not quite right. So if it did, for example, assuming these two actually reconciled, you can do select all of that and select all of this, and then you'll be able to see that it actually reconciles here. And in this case it's not reconciling, so if I try to reconcile, it will not do anything, as it is not a match. But that's how you would go and reconcile a group of entities, by trying to filter them out. So I'm going to now clear my filters, clear both sides, and deselect both sides. Right, now, so that explains that aspect of it. Now, in addition to this, assume we have actually done all of the items, we've cleared all of the items. I will come back to that, okay, but Or maybe I'll just demonstrate that. So for example, we cleared most of the items. So then we can actually group the items that cannot be reconciled. So suppose we cleared off all of the bank items. Let me do an exact match here to clear that off. Okay, so those are matched out. Now I'm going to go and demonstrate how we can do the batch matching, and then come back and demonstrate the unmatched items. Now with the batch matching, you need to just make a note of the column where the batch references are. So here batch reference, so this batch has 2 transactions. Now this batch has quite a few transactions and they're different. That's the same number. Oh yeah, no, 252, that's the same number. And there's 2 different batches here, actually maybe more than 2. So there's a few batches in this transaction. So let me demonstrate how you do a batch reconciliation. So I'm going to go out here, now the first thing you need to do is to set up your batch. Now here the primary data and the secondary data both have batch references, which makes it easy. But sometimes either way it's easy, but sometimes you might have only the primary data. The primary data hasn't a batch, the secondary data has a batch, or the secondary data doesn't have a batch, and it reconciles back to one figure in the primary data. So for example, now this one has both of the data sets have batches. So I'm just going to show you first a simple batching by date. So you can batch by the date. So I'm going to say it's the full columns, the batch, full column, and then you can review the batch. So on that day, that's the total, and on that day, that's the total. And as you can see, there's no matches. Okay, so the date match function didn't work. Remember, when I clicked it in the other screen, the previous screen, it didn't work here as well, because there is no dates that actually match in total. So I'm going to go back now. Now, one thing you could do is, once you do this, you have the option of saving your batch filter, so that something like this way you could use it constantly or quite regularly. So you would want to try and save that. So let me see if I have any saved batching. Oh yeah, I do have saved batches here. Okay, so I'm not go I could use it. So for example, if I wanted to, I'm just going to go and change this to something else. That, and if I go to the open, and if I say okay, I want to use the date in total, the use, it sets the filters back to what you selected, and you can just select this and go and find it. Now in terms of the batch, I've also created one for the batch, but I'm going to show you how to set it up. It shows you how it was set up here. So but I'm going to just demonstrate it here for you. So if you go to here batch, and it's not the full field, because you don't want the counter of the transaction counter to come into this one, because it was a 4-digit and then it had a slash and a number representing the transaction number. So here I'm going to say that I want that field, and I want it starts with, and I'm not going to put anything to start with, because I want it to start from the very first character, and I'm going to say it is 4 characters long. I'm going to do the same for the line description where the batch is, and I'm going to say it starts with, and I'm not going to put anything for the character to start with. I'm going to say 4. Incidentally, there is a help menu here which actually tells you what the selectors would do and how you go about setting it. So that is quite handy for you to look at when you're getting used to it. But once you get used to it, you could just try it out and see what it comes up with. Once you understand your data, and once you have understood and set the field up correctly, you can of course obviously go and save it and give it a name. So I'm going to just run this. As soon as you run it, as you can see, I can see that batch matches with that batch, and that one matches with this. So there you can see. So with that, then I will be clearing all the transactions from these batches, 2 batches which were there. So I can, if you select batch match batch on identifier, that's the identifier. Here it'll look for the same batch number, identical batch number, and where the total reconciles, and it'll match it. Now in this particular instance the total matches, but it has different batch numbers, so which means that will not get matched if I were to hit this. This one would get matched if I were to hit with the batch identifier as well. Batch identifier would be more accurate in terms of its matching, because they get a double match if the identifier plus the total is matching, but with the batch it is only looking at the value and then doing the match irrespective. So if I do use this, for example, just to demonstrate, you see that item got matched because it had the same identifier, but this one didn't, even though I know it reconciles with this item over here, as you can see here. So I can just match that one. So with that, we are left with only these items that haven't been reconciled. If I go back, return back to my review, as you can see all the transactions have been reconciled. If I look at all the matched transactions, so these are what have been matched. You can see the totals both reconciled here and here. So we know it reconciles. So go back to the unmatched items, and I can see only these 3 transactions haven't been reconciled because there is nothing to reconcile it with. Now here is where you can group the items which are not matched or cannot be matched, and the reason why it is not matched. So you start off by showing the description here. Now for example, if you said, oh, this is a bank error and these 2 are uncleared checks, so unpresented checks, oops, I put unpresented checks here. Okay, so those are unpresented checks, and that is my reconciliation. Incidentally, the items you select here, you can actually create the items. So you give it a group description and you'll explain what does that mean, and you would let the system know where to adjust it, whether it's going to be the GL or the bank. Incidentally, so these are the abbreviations which were entered in the setup. So this is where it is helpful to have an abbreviation. If you do not provide an abbreviation, it's likely to end up with, I think, primary data and secondary data, which makes no sense. So always give it an abbreviation when you're doing the data setup. It is more helpful when you're actually working with it, because you know what you're dealing with, and also where it's going to put the information in terms of where the reconciling items would end up. Now you can identify, because the primary data is always on the left hand side and the secondary data is on the right hand side in this particular scenario. So I'm going to close that down. So you can also number these, and so that you can set the order and then renumber it so that it can number it from 1 onwards. So that's a useful function. You don't need to muck around too much with this, but it does have to have that functionality to actually order it in the order that you wanted in the transactions to show when the selection is done here, which makes it more efficient. You can keep the ones which are used more frequently at the top. Right, so I've done that. So if you were to go back, you can see here, you can see that was the bank. That closing balance of here of 40,000, but there is a bank error of 1,005 which needs to be informed to the banking. It needs to be corrected there. From a general ledger perspective, we had the closing balance of 1.4 million, and we have the 200 reconciled items. And as you can see, both of the bank and the GL both reconcile with a 0 variance. So that is the reconciliation process. There is a few additional functionality which we'll try and cover now, and that is the ability to split a transaction. Very rarely used, but you can split a particular transaction where, for example, if this transaction was entered in incorrectly, but there is corresponding transaction on this side which it should have been, you could always split the transaction and enter in the correct figure and match it with this transaction. That enables you to complete your reconciliation and know by how much you need to adjust the original transaction in order for it to reconcile, and that will form your reconciling items, and you need to go and process that entry to get it to reconcile. And in that instance, I would always create a grouping saying like GL error, to say, okay, I need to go and correct the GL. So then when you look at all the transactions in your report that comes out saying GL error, that's something you need to correct your GL with. Again, but like I said, it's not always used, because you don't change your source data which you brought in, but this functionality enables you to continue with the reconciliation, get the reconciliation done and dusted, and know what transactions you need to process in each of the systems. If you have the ability to process in both systems. In this case, you can't process in the bank system, but you know what you need to inform the bank if there is a bank error. And that's that functionality over there. Suppose you accidentally split it. Note that if you were to split it and you say, okay, this transaction should have been only 1,500, it'll actually adjust the original transaction so that in total it's 1,500. So you know that that's the error. That's the error that should have been. Or I would ideally put the error in the split column, so you had to split it, and that's where the error is. So that's the correct one. So you would reconcile that deposit, and then that will be the split is the error. Suppose you split it and you think, oh, that's not correct, I made an error while trying to by splitting it. You can always delete the split. You can only delete the split, you cannot delete the original transaction, and it reinstates the original value. So that is an additional functionality that is there to help you to continue with your reconciliation. There's also the functionality like if the description is too big and it's not fitting in the column, you can increase the column size, and that is a user by user preference. You can do it on both sides. So that is the reconciliation process in a nutshell. Now, once you finish the reconciliation and now this is done, you can always come out and then you generate your report. So with the generation of the report, it puts the data all onto Excel. I shall open it there, Excel file. So this is what the report looks like. So you get a summary rec which tells you what it is. Here if you come, you can see the unmatched bank transactions. Now there's nothing, we matched all of the bank transactions. Unmatched GL transactions, so these were the transactions that we could not match, and this is very handy to import into your next rec to try and reconcile it. But if it's a bank error and the bank has fixed it, then you don't need to import that. You might have to import that one, but you'll need to process it and show that it was actually reconciled. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind, but in most bank errors are not very rare generally, but it does tend to happen from time to time, but it depends on what two systems you are reconciling. Okay, so those are the unmatched items, and here is the groupings, so you can actually filter it and see how much each group is. Then these are the matched items, so that's all the transactions that are matched. Here is the match reference, so if you look at number 1 here and number 1 here, those two figures will match. Okay, so you can filter the totals and you can see that they match. Alright, so that is that, and then this is the original data that was brought in. So this is what you'd normally bring in, excluding this transaction number which is provided to the system when it's imported in. So you would have these 3 columns, and then your actual data is placed in the data column area. And then that's what's imported in. So as you can see, the actual data had a debit and a credit, but we would bring that in as a positive and a negative, similar to here as well. Here it didn't have a debit and a credit, I don't recall. The bank transaction, no, the bank transactions just had an amount. There was no debits and credits in the bank transaction amounts in this particular instance, but there can be, so you just bring it in accordingly based on that. So you have the debit and credit, and so the data is from here the GL is here. The GL is here. So GL didn't have a debit and a credit, but the bank transaction had a debit and a credit. My error there. Okay, so that is what the report looks like. Now I hope this was helpful. Let me see if there's anything further that I want. This is just to show you where the report is saved. Remember, this file will always be overwritten. When a new report is run, it will override this particular file. So if you need to save the report, just make sure that you open it and save it as somewhere, and you save it with the month and the year or whatever that you want, and the description of what the reconciliation is about. So you'd save it there, save it wherever you want to save it for your historical data and the historical recs that have been performed. So that brings me to a conclusion of the overview of this software. I shall in the following videos, I don't need that one. I'll probably provide a little bit more explanation and demonstration of how to import the data in here. The setup is reasonably straightforward. You set the data types in and you bring in the fields, but I'll cover a little bit of that when I bring in the data and do that demonstration. I will also be looking to do a further demonstration or a training video on filtering here and doing the reconciliations. I think I covered it briefly through this particular training video, but I might do a further training on all of these functions just to elaborate on some of the processes and some of the selections that can be made. And also maybe the batch. One item I failed to mention is that similar to the batch, any filters that you set up here, you can also again save those filters if it is something that a filter that you will use repetitively. Obviously, if you filtered by an amount, you would not save that because it's again very unlikely you're going to filter by that same amount and find a transaction in the following month. And if it's a very basic filter like double clicking the amount and getting it on both sides, you will not be wanting to save that because it's a simple function of just double clicking it here. However, if there is a filter where you use a text description which can group two similar types of transactions, you might want that functionality each month, because that's sort of maybe a repetitive transaction that takes place within the organization. In that case, you probably save it. Let me see if I have any saved options here. I've not saved any here. There's nothing that has been saved, as you can see, so it's just a blank. I've not actually created any filters there, so I'll probably walk through on how you go about saving the filters. Alright, thank you for watching this video, and I hope it has been helpful for you to understand how the software operates and what the software can help you to achieve in terms of saving time on a routine mundane task that a lot of accountants spend hours each month reconciling various data sets to make sure that the data can be relied on. Thank you very much.